So the season is over. The East is finished, the West is finished, and we got the final standings for the season. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about how they affect each other, and let's talk about how this Western Conference final day affect the league. First, every team played, and they played their fair share of matchups. We got to see the East finally close up, and then the West had all of their games at the same time. We got to see a few key matchups, which decided a lot of seeding, and these matchups were really what made it so that the standings could look the way that they do now. The Western Conference finished in a very impactful way with the Oklahoma City Thunder being the number one seed as they absolutely smoked the Mavericks, which were tanking in their last game because they didn't really care about the seeding and they wanted to rest their stars and they were already clinching into the playoffs. And it caused them to be able to get the first seed because they got the tiebreaker over the Nuggets, who also won their game yesterday, which they played against the Grizzlies. The Oklahoma City Thunder are, I think, the youngest team in NBA history to get a first seed. They are honestly the best team in the West right now when it comes to just future and draft picks and potential. And they've shown that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, now his MVP case is solidified, even though he's most probably not going to win it. And we see now that the West has opened up in a way that we hadn't seen before. First, we have to say that the Lakers beat the Pelicans, which caused the Suns to go into the playoffs. If you guys didn't know, I had spoke on this for like 3 videos in the past 3 weeks, but it was this who was gonna get that 6th seed. We knew that the Mavericks were gonna get that 5th, the Clippers were gonna get that 4th because they had already secured their playoff position. And even if they lost a lot of their games, it was because they were resting their stars, because they could have won a lot of the matchups which they lost. The Timberwolves in their last day lost against the Suns, and the fact that the Suns won and the Pelicans lost made the tiebreaker the decider, which the Suns ended up winning, and it cost the Timberwolves the first seed. The Timberwolves, if they would have won that game against the Suns, would have been the number 1 seed, but they actually got relegated down to the 3rd seed, which is pretty interesting considering the fact that that is actually worse for the Thunder, who are in the 1st seed. If we're being 1,000% honest, whichever 2 teams come out of the play-in are not going to be fun to look at, especially whichever team is the 8th or is the 8th seed. You know, is that the Warriors? Maybe. Is that the Pelicans? Maybe. Is that the Lakers? Maybe. Is that the Kings? It maybe. But what we do know is that these teams are now going to compete. And the Oklahoma City Thunder, being such a young team, being out of the standings and being able to be the 1st seed, has allowed them to have honestly a disadvantage coming in playoff time. The reason why is because these teams are not going to look at the Oklahoma City Thunder with any type of forgiveness. They're not going to care about what the Oklahoma City Thunder have been doing. All that they're going to do is that they're going to look at the Oklahoma City Thunder and be like, okay, you know, you are good, you're a good team, but we unfortunately have to smoke you and have to, you know, put you to sleep, because if we don't, then it's going to cost us our season. And the Oklahoma City Thunder, let's just say it, I don't think they're winning against any of the playing teams in a 7-game series. Their style of play, and this is not to be a hater, but their style of play is one that's not conducive to wins yet in the playoffs, and has not shown that it can actually be consistent in its way of playing. Yes, it is good, it is effective, and it works. But just because something works doesn't mean that something should be done all of the time. The reason why I say this is because you see with teams like the Timberwolves or the Lakers, where the Timberwolves and the Lakers are both teams which have been playing teams in recent years. But the Lakers made the Western Conference Finals and the Timberwolves got out in the first round. Now, yes, the Timberwolves did face the Nuggets twice, but if we're being honest, there are teams which are more playoff ready than others. Every LeBron team is very playoff ready in its own right, if we're just being 1,000% honest, because of the way that LeBron sees the game and how good he is in playoff situations. Also, that they play a grittier, slower side of basketball, which honestly works coming into a postseason. Other teams this season, like the Kings, don't even look prepared to play themselves, as they have been completely out of whack. De'Aaron Fox looks like he doesn't know what he's doing when he has a basketball in his hand. And if we're being honest, this Western Conference, even though there are a lot of great teams which could come out of it, if we're being honest, there are only maybe 6 teams which actually have some type of merit to consider them for them winning the West. These teams are the following: the Nuggets, obviously; the Lakers, obviously. They were the Western Conference finals last year. Those are the 2 teams that you have to consider because they've proven that they can go and make it to the farthest level of the Western Conference. And I said the Western Conference, not of the playoffs. The playoffs is the final. But of the Western Conference, the highest level is the Western Conference Finals, and the Lakers and the Nuggets, which are now both in the picture of the playoffs, have the biggest chance to make it. Then we see the Clippers and Mavericks in the same situation. They're both 2 teams which, with the cores that they have made the Western Conference Finals before and have had a lot of success. They've actually proven, and their stars have proven, that they can win. Not some at the highest level like Kawhi Leonard, some getting very far in their playoffs because of their own will. And a guy like Kyrie won a ring, Luka went to a Western Conference Finals, PG went to an Eastern Conference Finals, and Kawhi won a ring. Those teams are proven that they can win in those teams, in those franchises. So that's 4 teams already. The Pelicans haven't proven anything. The Timberwolves really haven't proven anything. Neither have the Thunder. But I will give the edge to the Timberwolves because now they have experience. Now they have guys which have been to the playoffs twice already. And they're coming in with a confidence, a defensive style, and a coach which has now seen the playoffs multiple times against the best team. And they don't have to go up against the Nuggets anymore in the first round. So not having to go up against the best team in the West in the first round has to be something that you have to be pretty happy to happen, and you probably feel pretty confident in yourself when you look at it that way. So I would put the Timberwolves up there, and finally the Suns, because they made the finals with Devin Booker, and then Kevin Durant is a champion, and Bradley Beal, even though he hasn't done anything in the playoffs. And I know that this reasoning is flawed, because just saying because of guys' accolades how their team is going to do is not the best, success method. But if we're being honest, the Suns have a chance of making it very far into the playoffs just because of their experience and the fact that they took the Nuggets to 6 games last year, which was the most by any team. So, now, what about the Warriors? What about the Kings? And what about the other teams? And I don't feel like they could win it. The matchups, and I'm going to assume, just like I did in last video, that the matchups, that the 9th and 10th place of the play-in don't win their games and they lose and they get eliminated and whatever. So the 7th seed is going to be the Pelicans. The 8th seed is going to be the Lakers. If you get mad because Stephen's there, I'm sorry. I did this in last video too. It would be Thunder Lakers first round. I would give it to the Lakers because of experience, because of pace of play, and because of the fact that they have actually beaten the Thunder this season. The Nuggets and Pelicans, I'm taking the Nuggets. I think that's going to be a harder series for the Nuggets because they cannot stop Zion. But I do think in the end, Jokic and Murray will be able to get it done for the Nuggets. Then we have the Timberwolves and the Suns, which will be a very interesting series as we will get to see 2 teams which match up pretty evenly. I do think the Timberwolves might take that just because of defense and how prone the Suns are to make mistakes in the late game because of how little they've played together. And finally, the Clippers and Mavericks, which is a banger of a series because if you know their history, then you know that those teams do not like each other. in which I would honestly take the Mavericks because as much as I like the Clippers, I do think that Luka might turn it up a notch and beat that team. Those are my predictions for the first round. I do think that there can be a variation. The Clippers look much better and they have James Harden now. The Mavericks have two centers. The Pelicans look more complete, yada, yada, yada. But in my opinion, those are my predictions for the first round of the playoffs.